Hey guys, time for another retro review. This time we're going to be looking at War Machine number 8. This is by Len Kaminsky with an assist by Scott Benson as writers and Gabriel Gecko as penciler. And here you have the fallout of a friendship gone awry. Jim Rhodes and Tony Stark have been friends for years, and they met in the Vietnam War in this story. And eventually, Tony didn't want to be a hero anymore, and so he passed on the mantle of Iron Man to Jim Rhodes, who carried it for a while. And then he said he didn't want the responsibility in the name of Iron Man. So Tony took it back. Well, eventually Tony created this War Machine armor and gifted it to Jim and said, you know what, you're my best friend. We have, literally fought through wars together. So here's a set of armor that you can use to do good. And he feels as though Jim, through a couple of international incidents earlier in this series, has not really lived up to the expectations that Tony had put forth. And so I think the previous, I think maybe 10 months before that, right about the time that War Machine went off on his own, then he had they had a falling out. Tony was in the hospital and unable to move due to a techno-organic virus. And so Rhodey came in there and gave him the armor back, or put the armor down, and he said, I'm through being your war machine. And Tony says, you know, if you want to leave here hating me, that's all right. Maybe I deserve that. But that armor on the floor is yours. Take it. I gave it to you. And then finally it shows Tony calling him and saying, what have you done with this armor that I gave you? You're messing everything up. There's international laws, there's peacekeeping laws, there's things like that that you've gotten yourself involved in that I've never intended this armor to be a part of. So in the end, he goes back to Stark International, and he says, you're the manufacturer, do you honor the warranty on this? I want it repaired. And Stark says it's been misused in a way that I didn't see. So no, give me the armor back. I want it back. And Jim said, hey, if you want it, come take it. So they start fighting and going back and forth. And what this ends up leading into is a massive 12-part story called The Hands of the Mandarin. Because here you see the Mandarin looking on at their battle. For a long time, this book and Iron Man were both really great. And I want to say that Len Kaminsky was writing both of them at the same time, so they had a similar feel to them, even though Jim Rhodes had branched off into the Avengers West Coast at some point, and some other, like I said, some international incidents that happened in this book. But other than that, they had a very homogenous feel to them. They both felt very similar. It's kind of like Spider-Man at one point had 4 different books going, and you could tell that they were all the adventures of Spider-Man, but each writer kind of put their own little twist into Amazing, Spectacular, Web, and then the Adjectiveless Spider-Man. They all had a different feel to them. These 2 books could have been part 1 and part 2 of the same story during this time. And it was a really, really great time to be reading Iron Man, because you had Jim Rhodes, who was trying to branch out and be his own man and do his own thing, and he wasn't trying to screw Tony Stark over. He wasn't trying to cause international incidents. He was trying to do what was right. And in the end, this is part 1 of 2. It was continued in Iron Man 3:10. And at the end of that issue, they both get surprised by the Mandarin. But this book here stands solidly on its own. It is fun, adventurous. The artwork is excellent. I thought Gabriel Gecko did an excellent job. I think he only stayed on maybe for one or two more issues after this, and then they changed artists, but his art is very solid. The ink work by Pam Eklund is excellent, but it's kind of like you can look at it from earlier issues, and during those earlier issues, there was a lot more detail, like in the figure work and the line work and things like that. And here, it's almost like it was rushed artwork. So maybe Gecko got behind on the deadlines and he just couldn't hang anymore. But it's not as detailed. But then again, you've got panels like this one that show off War Machine in such a powerful way that you can't help but just look at it and say, man, this guy's good. He's really good. And one thing I don't think you noticed, because I didn't notice it again until now, this book I think had a cellophane bag over it, and it came with a art cell from the Marvel Action Hour cartoon series. I've got one of those floating around here somewhere. I'll have to find it and show it to you guys in another video. But they would polybag them and put that art cell in the back of it. And like I said, for that reason, this book was $2.95, where normally Marvel books of that age were still floating about $1.95. So for an extra $1, you would get a cell shaded animation cell sheet from that Marvel Action Hour, which had Iron Man on it. So, but that is it for War Machine number 8, guys. You can probably find this out in the wild relatively cheap. Matter of fact, the bag that I've got it in here, I found it at a local antique store for $1.50. So you can't beat that to get part 1 of part 2 of a really great storyline that leads into a big 12-part crossover that I think it went through 3 books. I think it went through War Machine, Force Works, and Iron Man. So it was really only 4 parts in each title. But this is some great 90s Marvel. It is, I'm not going to call it a masterpiece or masterwork, but this is some really great storytelling with an awesome artwork. And if you guys can find it for $1.50 or less, you should definitely pick it up, along with the rest of probably the first 11 issues or so of this War Machine run. All right, guys, that's it for that retro review. Thanks for joining me. I got a lot more coming up.